we started essentially a group of people that were sharing a space at the Open Gov Hub 1.0. And by the way, I'd very much encourage all of you to go visit the Open Gov Hub 2.0 at 1100 Vermont Avenue, which is a space in which about 30 organizations, all of which are interested in open government and trying to improve the relationships between citizens and governments work. And in the first edition of this, a couple of people were quite interested in how can we better listen to the voices of citizens. And so over a very informal series of conversations that were made possible by the fact that we were sharing a space, so we didn't have to organize meetings. We just would get together, talk and talk and talk, and it then became a set of voluntary meetings where we were very lucky to bring in on video conference people from Twawiza in Tanzania, and we were extremely lucky to have from London David Bunbright just joining us in our conversations. And I think David now has a new name as the Johnny Appleseed of feedback. And he tells me he likes it, so we're going to continue this. And we really basically did this on a voluntary basis, trying to figure out how we could really put in practice what we all believed in, which is how it is important for people to listen to the voices of those that we're trying to help, whether domestically in the United States or international development. And we are lucky to get a kind of a small seed grant from the Rita Allen Foundation, which allowed us to probe the field and find out where in the world were people doing feedback, how were they thinking about closing the feedback loop. And when it became clear that there was really something there and that it needed to become a kind of a movement, we then decided to create feedback labs. Dennis Whittle, that you'll hear from in a minute, left his job and started gathering a couple of people. And because we didn't want to really be bogged down by administrative issues, then Development Gateway hosted feedback labs, and we were very lucky and very fortunate to get some funding from the Fund for Shared Insight. And yesterday you saw how this movement is also growing in philanthropy in the United States. And so we really started as a group of friends trying to do something. We now have 15 members that are formal members of the feedback. This is the third summit, and I'll let Dennis explain to you how we got there. And what we do is try to be a focal point for gathering emerging knowledge, experience, and to do this not from a theoretical point of view, but by finding exactly how can it work. So we have created this thing called the Lab Storm, which allows people who are really struggling with how to listen better to the people they're trying to help. They can come and really present what they do, and they get very honest, unvarnished feedback, which sometimes helps them, so that we try not only to talk the talk, but to walk the talk by providing feedback and really growing the movement. And we have 15 formal members. We have organized 30 Lab Storm with a very small team that I would like to recognize and congratulate. And now we have over 200 organizations that are involved in feedback loops in some way. So what I'm very excited about is to see how this movement is growing, not only in spreading, and with Johnny Appleseed among us, it's going to spread even better, but also in depth, by really trying not simply to advocate for feedback, but also to try to deal with what are very difficult challenges. on how to actually make it happen. And so we're going to be concentrating this session on how can we practically make this happen. And to let you know what we hope to accomplish, I will let the godfather of the movement now talk to us. Dennis?
So welcome, everyone, and especially to the new people who are joining this, who are joining us for the first time. And it is a fantastic group of people you're joining, and I want to extend a special welcome to you. So as Jean-Louis said, these next 2 days are about feasibility. And somebody said to me last week, feasibility? That's kind of unassuming. It's not very audacious. What's wrong with you, Dennis? That's pragmatic, plodding. That's boring. And it reminded me that we've had a lot of big conversations over the last couple of years that have been very exciting. The first Feedback Summit last October was about feedback as the right thing to do, morally and ethically. Then we had another summit together with the World Bank in March, I think it was, right, March, about feedback as the smart thing to do, looking at the conditions under which feedback leads to concrete improvements in outcomes. We saw some studies that showed 20 or 25% increases in child survival rate, student attainment, reductions in cardiac deaths, concrete examples of better outcomes where feedback is the smart thing to do. But at the end of each of those two summits, everybody came back to the same topic. Okay, we got it. We got it. It's the right thing. Yeah, we got it. It's a smart thing. We got it. But we need to know how to do it. We need to know how to do it. So that's what everybody told us they wanted, and that's what this year's summit over the next day and a half is going to be about. How do we close feedback loops? How do we actually do it? So this is, I got an email a few days ago. I got this email, and here was the attachment that I got. It's an actual screenshot from a complaint that I submitted to Washington, D.C. With C-Click Fix. It says, your issue has been outstanding for 1,471 days. And I had excitedly opened this email because I thought they were going to tell me something had happened with this intersection that I've been complaining about. But instead, I just was reminded that the city had done nothing for 4.5 years in response to my complaint. So this kind of illustrated that the good news is that it's from a technology point of view, and we have some great technology companies here, it's easier than ever to collect feedback from people. But the bad news is that often it's hard to get good feedback and even harder to close the loop when you get feedback. Here's another example of feedback that people are trying to do. This is a complaint form that you can submit to the Baltimore police if you feel that you've been mistreated. It has 29 fields, I think, right, Megan? 29 fields you have to fill out, including information like the officer's full name and badge number, things that you probably don't have if you're in a situation where you're complaining about the police. So our goal over the next 2 days is to equip ourselves with the practical tools and approaches that we all need to get good feedback and then to act on it. The opposite of the two slides we just saw. And it's something that many people in this room are already working on, and you're going to hear from many of them. Brad, where's Brad Dudding? Brad, the COO of CEO, which is the greatest title on earth. He's going to talk to us about how the Center for Employment Opportunities is making steps to close feedback loops. Is Isabella here? Isabella Jean will be here. She may be a little bit late. She's going to be running a session on how we can use feedback to trickle up to inform policy making in big organizations. She'll be with us shortly. So how do they do it? How does Brad do it? How does Isabella do it? That's the question that we're going to be helping each other answer. How do we close feedback loops in our own work and listen to the people we serve and then act on what we hear? So part of it's about tools, and part of it is also about momentum. And everywhere I look, just looking here in the room, I see momentum. I see it with the Global Delivery Initiative coming out of the World Bank, Government of Korea, USAID, GIZ. I think we have someone here from Berlin, which is a multi-country cross-institutional initiative to help governments listen and adapt better, and aid agencies to listen and adapt better. I see it and saw it full blast yesterday. Many of us saw it full blast yesterday with the work that Faye Twersky and Lindsay Louie have been leading at the Hewlett Foundation, and we've been working together since for the last 3 years. I see it with the gang of collaborators that they've gathered together, including LiquidNet, Ford Foundation, Rockefeller, Packard, Kellogg, 30 other. I think it's up to 35 total. 36 total foundations that Hewlett and Rita Allen and others and LiquidNet have all pulled together to start working on this together. They joined together to create the Fund for Shared Insight. And anybody who is Melinda, where's Melinda? Anybody who knows Melinda Tuan, the head of the Fund for Shared Insight initiative created by those foundations, and who has held 2 events in the last 2 weeks, one at the White House and one a gathering at the Reagan building yesterday. Anybody that knows Melinda knows the momentum that's been created by the Fund for Shared Insight, and I will say no more. Is Valerie here? Part of connected to that is the Listen for Good initiative. And Valerie has now almost 60 organizations, probably representing every state in the country, working in every state, well, close to every state in the country, that she's helping to take the first steps toward feedback. So the summit today is really a continuation of a series of events and a series of gatherings, and it builds on and extends those. And I haven't even begun to describe many of the others. I see Samir is here, and Samir and I will be talking with Dickie Settle of Path and Christy Reagan and others. This, I think, is this afternoon or tomorrow about the Practical Adaptation Network, which Samir has spearheaded through USAID. It includes the Omidyar Network and their grantees who are all wrestling together with questions of feedback and specifically how information can be power, how the feedback process can lead to empowering people and resulting in better outcomes. And I know that Roy Steiner and Masha are going to be here. There's Roy right there. And Masha, terrific, welcome. Both here, and they're doing some very exciting, I think, path-breaking stuff as well. The gang of organizations that Jean-Louis described that came together and had those first series of brown bag lunches at the Open Gov Hub are the core of feedback labs, and they are doing extraordinary work together, and it's such a pleasure. And I think my former colleagues at Global Giving, Mari and Britt, are here. Mari and is Britt here? Britt. Britt's been leading a technology platform development that has allowed feedback to happen in over 100 countries around the world, which is truly extraordinary. You met Jean-Louis Sarbib. His gang at Development Gateway is doing all this mapping and data work that's enabling aid organizations and governments worldwide to really, for the first time, get a big picture of what's happening and eventually be able to hear back from people on the ground. The Johnny Appleseed, David Bonbright of Keystone, he needs no introduction, but David has been working on this for a decade and has been an advisor to many of the many leading organizations, and is now developing a platform called the Commons that will enable many more organizations to use it. And then Laura Walker McDonald of SimLab, I don't think she's here yet. She's one of the other core members of Feedback Labs. So I encourage you to find, if you don't know these people that I mentioned, and I should be mentioning many more. I see Ronnie there from the World Bank. I'm leaving out most of the people, but I encourage you to find them and talk to them and get welcomed into this crazy movement, this crazy family. Is Evan here? Evan Bloom, Jennifer. We have many new people that are just coming in. Evan Bloom from Root Change, Jennifer Bradley from the Aspen Institute. New people are joining the Feedback Labs every day. So I encourage you, if you're interested in formal membership, to be in touch. Next week, to continue the momentum. Many of the people here will be at a London version of this summit. Dave and Tris and who else is Ed and Bethia and Jen, Ed, Bethia. What's going on in London is equally impressive, and I think it's going to be the kind of hub of innovation throughout Europe and that part of the world, and that's terrific. New Philanthropy Capital, World Vision UK. I'm not going to start mentioning organizations, but it's very impressive. It's very impressive. So it's great to have a movement. It's great to have a lot of people. It's great to have a lot of meetings. Good food. Yesterday, by the way, the food was terrific at the FSI gathering yesterday. I strongly recommend going to an FSI. Just crash that, even if you're not invited, because the food is so good. It's great to have all those people and good food, but the bottom line's got to be impact. And I am happy to report that we're starting to quantify the impact of this movement. And we have been working with Max Meister. Mark, where's Mark? Mark, who's at Keystone and Global Giving, to develop and peer review, I'm happy to report, a mechanism for trying to estimate the ripple effects of the movement that we're all part of. And according to the estimates that Mark has done, in the last year, there's been about a 50% increase in organizations in our network here actually using some form of feedback. And so this is just baby steps. It's a crude measure, and it's just baby steps, but it's evidence of the impact of what everybody here has achieved in the last year. The momentum is definitely there. And this is not happening because of any one group. Faye and Melinda and Lindsay were talking about this recently. What's so interesting about this is that it's overlapping groups collaborating together, focusing on different things in different ways with different language, but somehow all pulling together and making this movement start to create new norms in the sector, which is the bottom line. One of the things we're trying to do here today, FSI was doing yesterday, we're doing at the White House, we're doing at PAN, is to try to create an environment where people can come together and literally create the future, to push the frontiers of feedback from a conceptual point of view and from a practical point of view. So as we go forward over the next day and a half, I urge you to think about what you're doing here, inventing the future. And we deliberately reached out to people who we thought were pioneers in the field to invite them to this. And people who I think will look back and see the vanguard is here today. And the only drawback of being in the vanguard or being a pioneer is that you can't be a spectator. And there's no hiding here today or tomorrow. If you're here, we want you to be asking yourself constantly over the next 36 hours, what do I need to do in the next 6 months? What can I do? What should I learn? What do I need to find out to close feedback loops for myself and my organization? How do I make it feasible for me? How do I make it feasible for my colleagues? How do I make it feasible for the sector? That's what we have to be asking ourselves. Movements like this don't happen because people write papers. Papers are important. I've written many papers. I think they're great. Not everybody reads them. Not everybody thinks they're great. But that's not really what moves the world usually. What moves the world is groups of people like us who take action. And so that's what matters. Our goal at Feedback Labs and here at the Summit is to help you do that. At the end of a day and a half, you should feel better equipped to go out and close feedback loops with your colleagues in your organization. You should have the tools, the relationships, the knowledge, the examples and role models to do it. And if you don't, at the end of a day and a half, then we at Feedback Labs have failed. And we take failure very seriously at Feedback Labs. So I want everyone to listen to this. If you try in the next 6 months to use what you learned over the next day and a half to close feedback loops in your work, if you really truly commit to doing that, and you try, and you use everything you learned here to do it, and you don't think that this summit helped you succeed, or at least try, then I want you to email us. I want you to email us in 6 months. Tell us what you did. Tell us what we could have done better. And we were going to refund your money to this summit or give you free pass to the next summit. And I'm dead serious about this. You go to so many conferences and things that I walk away from. I'm like, God, why did I spend time there? I'm not sure why that was use of my time. So we're going to make what may be the first ever money-back guarantee to hold ourselves accountable. That's our feedback loop from you. And we encourage you by doing this ourselves. We're serious about this, but I'm also encouraging you. We're doing this partly to encourage you to think about what is your feedback loop in your organization? What is your money-back guarantee? Your version of that you can be offering to the people that you work with. So on that, I'm going to close. Thank you again for being here. It's going to be a great day and a half. Thanks again for being here.